All right, let's get started. Good morning. My name is Erica Perrell, and I'm the communications manager at APEC. So happy that you could all join us this morning. I do have a couple of quick housekeeping notes before we begin our session this morning. So, as I mentioned earlier, for those of you on the phone, the presentations for this session are available online so that you can follow along. They're on the APEC website under the webinar. And as long as technology cooperates, I will have the video of today's webinar up tomorrow morning. So please feel free to share with your colleagues, your friends, and anybody who might find the information helpful. While you're on our website, you'll also see that APEC has been doing additional research on the economic impacts of COVID-19 in Atlantic Canada, as well as other research topics, including clean growth in Atlantic Canada. David might mention those a little bit later. To make sure that you're up to date on our latest research, you can follow us on social media. Twitter and LinkedIn are sort of the first place that we're going to update and notify you of our latest research and event information. You can also subscribe for email updates. We do promise not to inundate your email box too frequently. Another note for attendees this morning as well, we will be circulating a survey later on, and if you can take just a couple of minutes to complete that survey, that will be great and well appreciated. We do value your feedback and take it into consideration for future events. Finally, APEC is a membership-based organization. So if you're interested in supporting the research we do, membership information is available on our website. You can also feel free to reach out to myself or any of my colleagues. Our contact information is also available online. And again, just to reiterate again, one more time, for those just joining us, today's presentations are available right now on the APEC website, and the webinar will be viewable by tomorrow morning online as well. With that, I would like to hand the virtual mic over to APEC's President and CEO, David Shandy.
Well, thank you, Erica, and welcome to everyone. Welcome back to those of you who joined us for our first webinar, and welcome to those who are joining us for the first time in this series. At APEC, we've been very much focused in the last 6 months around COVID-19 and the economic implications of that. That continues to be a high priority for us as we navigate the recovery. But we've also been talking about 4 key issues, 4 key trends and drivers that are longer term issues and trends that we want to keep our focus on. One is how we grow our economy as we look at our demographics over the next 10 to 20 years. The second following from that is that we need to be reaching out to global markets, but the risks and how we manage and navigate that is changing, especially through COVID. The third theme is around digitalization and automation and the role of new technologies in supporting our future growth and competitiveness. And then the fourth theme is around kind of sustainability and how we ensure kind of the green and clean growth. And this series that we're in on energy really intersects with a lot of those. How do we grow and support our economy? How do we utilize new technologies, which is really going to be the focus of today's session, and how do we ensure this clean transition? So I want to thank Colleen with the Atlantic Centre of Energy for partnering with us on this series. So if you joined us 2 weeks ago, we had our first session, which really touched on some of the broader themes about how do we balance economic growth with a clean transition, the role of importance of energy costs, of regulatory policy, and I made some comments just in my introductory remarks that now is not the time to be tightening up on environmental policies and costs and burdens on a business community that's really struggling to cope with COVID and the recovery. I know there's been a lot of concerns in this region around the Canada Clean Energy Standard in that regard, but this is the time to look at new options and new ways to move forward and new technologies on a sustainable way. So if we go to our next slide, this is the focus of today's session. And Colleen will introduce our speakers in a moment, but we're really talking about some of those technologies that were a lot of questions about in our last session. What's the role? How do we develop these? But I just want to emphasize, these are not the only technologies at play. These are just a subset of technologies. We're really talking about what's the potential of these, what are the benefits and what are the risks? But I just want to emphasize, we're just taking 2 or 3 of these technologies, but there's lots of others that are being developed or deployed in the private sector. And then our final session, which will be in 2 weeks' time that you can register for, takes it up to another higher level. We've got the heads of power and utility companies speaking, and they'll be talking about what they are doing in this energy space and clean growth and sustainability, but also talking about the role of regional partnerships in particular. And you would have heard references in the last week or so to Atlantic Loop, for example. So how do we bring this together and work together as a region to maximize our energy future? So encourage you to register for that session if you haven't already. We will be providing a very short synopsis of the three sessions once they're concluded. And then the last point I want to make is that following this series, if you move to the next slide, Erica, we will be launching our own Outlook series. For those of you who are members or followers of APEC, you will be used to our regular in-person morning Outlook conference sessions. Again, because of COVID this year, we will be going online. There will be 5 sessions. They will be paid. So again, I just want to encourage you as part of our members, you benefit from very discounted rates for these sessions, and those of you who are watching who are not yet APEC members, encourage you to join and benefit from the analysis that we do that's exclusive for our members, benefit from discounted rates for these specific sessions, and again, other benefits to support an independent research organization in the region. So that's all I wanted to say by way of introduction. Now I'd like to hand it over to our partner, Colleen from the Atlantic Centre for Energy.
Thank you very much, David, and welcome to everyone this morning. I am Colleen D'Entremont, president of the Atlantic Centre for Energy, and we are a think tank that examines energy issues in the Atlantic region. And our whole point is to get information out to the public on energy issues that confront Atlantic Canada. We are a member of APEC, and we're very happy to be partnering with them to develop a series of informative energy webinars to create discussion on the energy issues that we are facing in this region. We need to look at our unique advantages here in Atlantic Canada and investigate what R&D innovations do make sense for this region. Today's topic of transformative energy technologies in Atlantic Canada will delve into various new technologies that may help us get to net zero by 2050. It also looks at how to integrate all these new technologies. And as David mentioned, there are many others, but a lot of information and a lot of questions and a lot of media play has been generated on small modular reactors and hydrogen for this region. And so we sort of focused on those two, but there's more, as he mentioned. So welcome to all of you who are with us today. We have 4 excellent panelists to bring us their perspectives. All of their bios are available on the APEC website, so feel free to get further information on them. First up is Derek Estabrook, and he is Vice President, Business and Development at Heritage Gas. Heritage has developed a plan to evolve from being a local distributor of natural gas to a broader energy approach that includes hydrogen. Speaking second will be Brett Plummer, Vice President Nuclear and Chief Nuclear Officer at MB Power. Brett will focus on the opportunity to develop small modular reactor technology in this region. So there's Nova Scotia and New Brunswick content. And next up is Greg Goody, the Municipal Services Director at the City of Summerside PEI. So Greg will discuss the integration of renewables with existing infrastructure and the technology that's needed to maximize that impact. And if you're not familiar with what's been going on in Summerside over the last 5 to 10 years, it's an amazing story, and I'm really looking forward to hearing Greg talk about it. Rounding out the panel will be Sonya. She is part of Smart Infrastructure and Digital Grid Initiative at Siemens Canada, and part of the Smart Grid Innovation Network. Sonya will focus on the importance of having a platform at a higher level to integrate these new technologies and the ones yet to come. So all the panelists are going to offer introductory remarks, and then we will have a general discussion to talk about all of it and the implications. So I'm going to turn the virtual mic over to Derek to kick things off. Derek?
Thanks, Colleen. Erica, can you go on to my first slide? Yeah. So it's clear that the incremental progress in emission reduction that most countries have achieved over the last decade or so is inadequate to address the magnitude of the climate crisis that the world is facing today. So as a result, you see people demanding much bolder action, and governments are responding by setting net zero by 2050 emission reduction targets. But setting net zero targets are easy to do. Achieving them will be the hard part. We're going to need to completely transform how the energy system works here in less than 30 years. And to do that, we're going to have to fundamentally change how energy in Atlantic Canada is produced and stored, distributed, and consumed. We're going to need really transformative new energy technologies, and we'll need new types of clean energy like hydrogen. On the next slide here, you can see that this chart illustrates why we're going to need new types of clean energy in addition to more clean electricity. Currently, just 22% of our energy demand in the Maritimes is met with electricity. And while electricity generation in the Maritimes has been getting cleaner, our electric grids are still among the most carbon intensive in all of Canada, especially here in Nova Scotia. And as a result, almost 1/3 of total greenhouse gas emissions in the Maritimes are produced from electricity generation, and we still have a lot of work to do to green our electric grids. We'll also need to green the 2/3 of our energy demand that's currently met with fossil fuels like refined petroleum products, natural gas, and propane, and that's going to be a massive challenge. And third, while reducing the size of our energy pie through energy efficiency and conservation will help, the Maritimes is still going to need a lot of energy in 2050, and almost all of that energy must be supplied by clean energy sources. So electrification, while it'll be very important, it alone won't be enough to achieve the kind of energy system transformation that we'll need to get to net zero in the Maritimes. As this next slide shows, this transformation will be more challenging because we'll need to decarbonize all energy sectors. So while some sectors can be electrified fairly easily, we'll also need to decarbonize sectors that are difficult to electrify, like heavy transportation and high temperature industrial processes that account for about 40% of our energy use. In the transportation sector, for example, almost half of our GHG emissions are produced by heavy transportation. So think large trucks, trains, ships, buses, and airplanes, and they will be very difficult to electrify. So on the next slide, to achieve net zero emissions, we'll need more types of clean energy that can be produced at large scale, stored and transported to meet our energy needs where it's needed, for the end users that need it, and when they need it, which is really important in northern climates like Atlantic Canada, where peak energy demand in the winter is significantly higher than the rest of the year. And one of the most promising clean energy technologies is hydrogen, and specifically green hydrogen that's made from renewable electricity. Green hydrogen can help make both the electric grid and the gas grid cleaner. And hydrogen can help to connect the cleaner electric and gas grids together to create a more integrated energy system that makes it not only more feasible for us to get to net zero emissions, but to do it at lower total cost than electrification alone. On the next slide, this just illustrates simply how green hydrogen is produced. The process starts by producing renewable electricity using wind or solar, or over the long term, maybe even tidal energy. Next, an electrolyzer uses the renewable electricity to split water molecules to create both hydrogen and oxygen. The hydrogen is compressed and stored, after which it can be used when it's needed, either hours, days, or even months later to meet peak winter energy demands. And then the hydrogen can be blended with or replace natural gas and used in the same ways that natural gas is used today for building heat, industrial processes, transportation, or power generation. On the next slide, I just want to conclude by saying the Maritimes is really in a unique position to be a leader in hydrogen because unlike most of North America and most other countries, Nova Scotia and New Brunswick already have a critical part of the infrastructure that's needed for the deployment of hydrogen. And that critical infrastructure is pipes, and specifically plastic pipes. This photo is from Leeds in the northern part of England. Leeds was selected to be the first city in the UK to convert its natural gas system to hydrogen because the city is currently replacing old iron gas distribution pipes with plastic. Hydrogen needs to be transported and distributed through plastic pipes, while most older gas distribution systems in Europe and even here in North America still use a lot of steel or iron pipes. However, Nova Scotia and New Brunswick New Brunswick's natural gas grid is a modern system that's all been built within the last 20 years and has mostly been built with plastic pipes. So we may actually have one of the best gas distribution grids in all of North America for the distribution of hydrogen. At Heritage Gas, we're doing a lot of work right now in this area to start to develop low carbon hydrogen. We recently applied for green infrastructure funding for a clean hydrogen pilot project, including a 4 megawatt electrolyzer that would be connected directly to a wind farm. This facility would generate about 40,000 gigajoules of hydrogen annually that would be distributed through the natural gas grid and used in conventional natural gas equipment. We also recently partnered with Liberty Utilities, the Nova Scotia Department of Energy and Mines, and COA on a Maritime's hydrogen feasibility study. This is going to be a really important piece of work that's being managed by the Offshore Energy Research Association and conducted by Clean Energy Solutions in partnership with Dunsky and Red Rock Power Systems. And the final report from this study is going to be released over the coming weeks. So while we're just getting started, we're really optimistic about the role that clean hydrogen will play in Atlantic Canada's clean energy future. Now I'm going to turn it over to you, Brett.
Thanks, Derek. I appreciate the time to speak today about small modular reactors. But first, I want to make sure everyone understands that from an MB Power standpoint, to meet our goals in the future, we are going to need all kinds of different clean energy generation. It's going to include renewables, distributed energy, hydrogen, digitalization, nuclear, and all that to support the electrification. But today I'm just going to spend a few minutes to talk about small modular reactors. Next slide, please. So first off, why nuclear? We really need it to meet the 2050 net zero goals that we've established here in Canada. And I'm sure you've heard on the news, Seamus O'Regan, federal minister, has very clearly stated we will not reach that goal without nuclear. Nuclear needs to be part of the mix. It is carbon free, and we need this as a complementary 24-hour-a-day power generation for the energy grid. It is also built to withstand external hazards. So when the sun's not shining, wind's not blowing, when we have an ice storm or a polar vortex or something of that nature, nuclear is online supplying power. We also had the challenge of we need to retire older fossil fuel facilities in New Brunswick and also Nova Scotia. And as we electrify, as Derek was talking about, we will need clean power to support that electrification. Next slide, please. So why small modular reactors? Why new nuclear? We went ahead and took the lead in New Brunswick at looking at a nuclear technology that would withstand the test of time and would also take care of two of the largest concerns associated with nuclear that the public has. One is the failure of the nuclear power plant proper, and the other one is the generation of used fuel. So we selected two advanced Generation 4 reactors. One is a Moltec stable salt reactor, and the other one is an ARC, which is a sodium breeder reactor. Both of these reactors have passive inherent safety features. They're small, 100 megawatts, 300 megawatts electric. They're modular. They can be transported and erected over the road, so they can be basically manufactured in a controlled condition for less money. They're simplistic. They're both depressurized pool reactors, so they don't require the defense in depth that the older thermal reactors that we run now. Both reactors we selected can recycle their own used fuel. Moltex is designed to convert CANDU used fuel and use that as a fuel within its reactor, and ARC has that capability as well, which it may execute in time. ARC has an extended core life, 20 years. Moltex is online refueling, very conducive to power generation. But these new small modular reactors, because they're fast reactors, integrate with renewables. The present reactors that we have today, thermal reactors, we like to leave as base load. We don't typically maneuver power on these reactors because of the neutronics within the reactor, which I'm not going to get into today. But the fast reactors don't have that issue, and fast reactors, either through the reactor design itself and or additional energy storage, because both of these reactors produce very high temperature steam. It's very conducive to integrate with renewables. So when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, the nuclear power plant can run. But when it is, the sun's shining and the wind's blowing, we can back off the nuclear or use it for other purposes like hydrogen generation. Okay, next slide, please. So part of this is we want to meet decarbonization, our 2050 goals, net zero. But the other thing around these small modular reactors is there is a business opportunity here. We've selected 2 reactors, Moltex and ARC, as I've talked about. The province of New Brunswick has invested initial seed money in these 2 technologies to come to New Brunswick, set up offices, and start doing studies, including research and development at UNB, Chalk River, to start a cluster, an infrastructure. We've done supply chain studies. We can manufacture approximately 50 to 60% of the components that we need within New Brunswick without capacity building, and more with capacity building. These are advanced technologies. So the education associated with that, the curriculum and the courses that we have at our universities, they will support higher paying jobs in the future. And as I said, the university involvement, we already started research and development on these technologies at the universities within New Brunswick. The other aspect is these are small modular reactors. They're not going to have the number of people on site as we do at Point Lepreau or some of the conventional stations that we have today. It'll be more of a fleet operational approach. It'll require a nuclear support center. That nuclear support center will support maintenance, training, design modifications, predictive analyticals. And again, that's an opportunity to be a base station here in New Brunswick. Next slide, please. One thing I want to clear up in the news recently, there's been in social media, there's been some discussion around using some of NB Power's own data associated with the cost of nuclear as compared to other technologies. And in doing that, they're using old data that looks at large nuclear. We're talking about small modular reactors. And there's different size reactors. There's very, very small reactors that could be used for remote communities. There's 10 megawatts electric up to 100 megawatts electric that could be used for mining communities. We're talking grid size small modular reactors. And the goal, because they're so simplistic that you don't require the defense in depth of the older reactors, the cost is much less. And presently, the challenge is these 2 technologies to come in at 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour. That is the challenge, and we need to prove it. But so the comparison using data with that's dated associated with large nuclear is not factual. So our goal is to make this power generation from small modular reactors very competitive. Next slide, please. So the business opportunity, we have done economic impact assessments, and we would like to build 2 first-of-a-kind reactors, both ARC and Moltex here at Point Lepreau site. We've done the initial economic impact associated with just the 2 first-of-a-kind reactors. You can see here, and this is the mid-range, the sensitivity, low, medium, high. This is the mid-range. There's 11,000 person-hours of employment, a GDP increase of $1 billion in provincial revenue. But as I mentioned, we want to create a fleet opportunity. And part of that fleet opportunity is we've done a tremendous amount of work with Canada developing the pan-Canadian approach in 3 streams, stream 1, 2, and 3, one being a bridging strategy in Ontario, being led mostly from Ontario in cooperation with Saskatchewan. Alberta just got on board as well. Stream 2 is the advanced reactors, which New Brunswick is taking the lead on, and Stream 3 is the smaller remote communities and mining community reactors. Anyway, so on Stream 2 and the advanced reactors in New Brunswick, that fleet concept with other reactors across Canada and potentially the export market. Again, in the mid-range, we are looking at potentially New Brunswick at a $10.2 billion increase in revenue, all said. In Canada, $57.7 billion, and that's the mid-range. It increases by tenfold in the high range. So there's opportunity here. There's opportunity to lead. There's opportunity to come up with advanced reactors that'll help get to net zero by 2050, and also integrate with all the different clean energy sources that are proposed. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Greg. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Brett, for the intro and handover. I appreciate all the attendance today. I'm here to really tell a story for the city of Summerside and its electric utility, which is municipally owned, and where we've gone in the last probably decade or so of trying to use innovative technologies that are available in our community that make sense. Next slide, please. So in this real quick one, it's a real quick history of Summerside Electric, and we're a typical electric utility, been around since 1920, owned by Summerside, and we've gone through our transitions to diesel plants, to a public utility oversight, to no public utility oversight through the next slide, please. And you can see through the history of the ownership of utilities, and it's very typical to electric utilities anywhere in Atlantic Canada, is they always usually start out with some type of diesel, and then they transitioned into thermal plants. And then in 1977, for Prince Edward Island, there was a cable installed connecting us to New Brunswick and New Brunswick Power System. And that was really on the coattails of the LaPro nuclear reactor to get energy from that system in New Brunswick, because they had lots of excess at that time. So, but in 2002, Summerside Electric became its own entity and not a customer of the provincial utility, which made us look very much so more business orientated and aggressive on our entrepreneurial spirit to try to create innovative technologies and integrate them into our electric utility. Next slide, please. And the funny thing that happened is necessity is a great stirrer of innovation. So in the submarine cable in 2006 that connected PEI became exceeded, and we started running a lot more diesel or thermal engines through the winter to compensate for load. So that made Summerside look at opportunities of how can we get local generation in PEI. And of course, with no hydro and no natural gas and no nuclear to say for opportunities for Prince Edward Island, and a lot of homes were heated with fossil fuels, we really looked at the wind as an emerging technology in Canada around this time period. So in 2007, we actually did a 9 megawatt independent power purchase deal with Westcape Energy. And then in 2009, we created our own 12 megawatt of wind that we integrated into our system at 46%. And that was with the help of NB Power, because they do definitely run engines to create a variability servicing service for our initiatives. And we do pay for that service, but it was very economical at the time. Next slide, please. So that led us into to look at how do we do energy in Summerside. So we had to expand our thinking in the four major groups as an electric utility, and to incorporate the new greening of the grid and also innovation in a lot of different factors. One was renewables, energy source targets to provide to our customers and the need for society. And the second one was also carbon footprint for the environment, which was very well known. So we were trying to green our electrical grid, at the same time creating opportunities for a transition from the consumer to the prosumer on our electrical grid. So one of the things we do in Summerside is we do all the same things as any other utility. We purchase, sell, produce, transmit, and distribute electricity. One of the things we do in Summerside, fairly active, is we research. And I know a lot of other utilities do, and we reach out to try to create partnerships in our area. And currently we found partnerships with CanMed Energy in Varennes, and renewable integration. We find different partners and business people like-minded that we try to work with. Our living lab is a link that's kind of unique for Summerside in our economic development arm. We try to restrict infrastructure access and open it up, take the restrictions away from infrastructure, open it up for business opportunities that are innovative where we want to go and where we think it should be going. Energy storage, we've always been looking at that, and customer engagement's huge with us as well. We're trying to empower the consumer for what they use, energy efficiency, as well as opportunities where we can integrate what they want to do with their devices into benefit need for many stakeholders, including the utility, the environment, and the customer altogether. Our innovative initiatives we've been working on for the last decade, maybe a little longer, is thermal storage, is Heat for Less Now program for our customers, which are basically taking home heating and space and hot water needs and electrifying it and controlling it basically in real time. So it matches our load and our variability of our wind and different resources we have on our grid. We've developed over 3 years now a credit union placed behind the meter commercial battery and solar system, which works in 4 different functions behind the meter for the facility. And those functions are really into areas of utility control, peak shaving for the building, black start capabilities for the building, and then solar smoothing for the battery as well. And we've done all 4 modes. It was really a pilot project for us to see what a utility scale system could do and accomplish. Smart meters and comms devices we get into are basically a similar of automatic meter reading that I would call. It has a little more conscientious devices to it for sags and swells and some different smart information for the health of our system. But we've been doing that since 2012. Artificial intelligence has been new in the last year, and we've been reaching out to companies, Blue Wave AI in particular out of Ottawa, that have helped us create artificial intelligence, create better decisions on our dispatch on how we coordinate all our energy sources, and ultimately make better decisions on where those energies are going to come from. And then we have electric vehicles. We have about 30 chargers in the community now for 15,000 people, about 7,000 homes. And we're expanding that to 56 here in the next year to get ready for adoption of residential type electric vehicles, not necessarily heavy transport that Derek was talking about for energy. The final one's heat pump storage. We've been into that for a while with a company called Stash Energy. And we've seen a huge uptake in air-to-air heat pumps for home heating on Prince Edward Island. So we've been working with a company, Stash Energy, for 3 years on trying to get a controllable storage heat pump that can be shut off for 4 hours at a time, which will alleviate our morning and evening peaks and help with our peaks in those areas. And we're using that to actively real-time communicate with and control. And all this is obviously done without customer service interruption. So we want to make sure, we always call it similar to the old oil tank that you had automatic fill up on. You don't really matter when the oil's filled in the tank, as long as you have heat from the system. So some of our renewable projects, we have some new ones on the books that just got announced last January in 2019, and we've been working steadily towards that goal to get an integration of renewables upwards of 65% on our system. And that is also going with a huge one-of-a-kind Atlantic Canada battery, I believe, for 10 megawatt, 20 megawatt hour storage battery. Solar farm will be 21 megawatts AC, along with our 2 wind farms. Next slide, please. So how we try to integrate all these resources is through what we call our smart grid. We've nicknamed it or labeled it My PowerNet. And in the red is what we've already accomplished. And the blue is our growth potential to start incorporating consumer devices on a micro and distributed scale. So we have smart end-use devices through our thermal appliances. We have a control interface already designed and working with advanced metering and consumer portal and building EMS, and that's linked into our utility SCADA systems, all trying to make intelligent decisions on how to integrate and use these devices. Next slide, please. So this is what a customer would see on their account when they're applied on a Heat for Less Now customer, as an example of how we try to engage customers. So that's a daily energy use profile. Residentials can go down to hourly, and customers can go down to 15-minute increments. And this lets them know exactly what's electricity is stored in their devices they have on the system, and what's available to be stored as well. And the utility has an aggregate dashboard where we can make decisions and move all of the devices together at once in orchestrated, I guess, with the grid, the best you can say. So we can do some load profiling and load manipulation on our grid. Next slide, please. So this led us into a huge work task with software interfaces. So it really took our utility into a different mode, which was more of a service-orientated mode than a provisional mode, because we had to start thinking differently to enable technologies and also to expand block value chains for these technologies. Sometimes when you take a rigid position on innovative technologies, it can be very difficult to find block value chains without having all the partners talking to each other and willing to work with each other to create value. So our integrations are I talked about earlier was the heat pumps, thermal storage, wind turbines, smart meters, utility SCADA systems, and solar and batteries. And one of the things that enabled us to do all this is we took a stance, luckily in our geographical area, that we actually built our own communication systems. So we had lower security risk because it was all physically isolated from the rest of the world. Next slide, please. So this is a quick photo of our Credit Union Place solar farm storage. It's a 336 kilowatt ground mounted solar panel design with the battery system at the Credit Union Place. It was really our first project we completed in 2017 for solar. And the intent for this was really to get good irradiation data. And data is really key for the integration and adoption of innovation technologies. Next slide, please. The next one is Summerside Sunbank, and that's the one that is to be completed in 2022. It's got quite a bit of news last year and is continuing. It's a $65 million project, and it's a 24 megawatt DC solar farm with the batteries, and it's to take us to 65%. And we're actually reusing well field lands for this use, since it's a fairly benign use for groundwater risk. Next slide, please. This led us to create our ecosystem innovation for economics. So we try to link it all together to economic development. So our story is, this is a slide that we try to tell our proponent discussions with people and business opportunities, what we're doing and what we're trying to get to in the city. And that could be anywhere from fiber optics communications to thermal storage to wind farms to solar farms and so on. This is what we use as our kind of our bulletin board to point to any discussions. Go ahead, please. Next slide. And for us, the sustainability meaning for us in innovation is we don't want to stay at 140 kilometers per hour on the highway. If that's where we're headed now, we don't want to go that way. We want to change. And that's what it means for sustainability. It doesn't mean to keep doing the same thing over and over again. I always like to say we're the zebra that's walking the other way in the grass field. They're all feeding it. We're still feeding, but we're just doing it in a different way. Thanks very much, and I'll hand it over to Sonya to talk about the integration at a higher level. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Greg. That was a perfect setup for what I'd like to talk about this morning. And I've titled it The Energy System of Tomorrow today, because everything that Greg's talking about and what I'm going to share with you and what Brett did as well, and as well as Greg, is really about the changes that are coming into a system that has essentially been the same for the last 100 years. And Greg was really giving an indication of how this is impacting, utilities, how it's impacting municipalities, how it's going to impact society. So you can advance the slide, Erica, thanks. So I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on this. I think everyone else has set this up very well in terms of we have some drivers that are really pushing us into this transition. And we have some drivers that are pulling us into this transition. If we look at climate change and some of the topics of what APEC and Atlantic are covering in their webinar series, the decarbonization, so kind of the big D. If we look at the 3 Ds, it would be decarbonization, digitalization, and decentralization. And those, we try not to make it too complicated, but really it's the how we're going to impact in a positive way our climate change reality by lowering carbon, and in this case from electricity generation, which is a large emitter, as we talked about in the beginning. As well, we have really extensive technological change that's happening, and it's really, the disruption is on our doorstep, and it's actually not just on the doorstep of many jurisdictions where it's actually becoming fully embedded. So what's seen as disruptive technologies in the electricity sector, we can actually look at as an opportunity. So they are pushing us, just like when telecommunications evolved. We need to look at this as not something that is to be pushed back against, but technology is moving us forward, and there's an opportunity here. But we have to be very, very planned and managed and intelligent in terms of how we accept this technology advancement and how we work it into something as complicated as the electricity grid. And I think we all know, the extensive nature of the grid and how it's built up over the last 100 years. It's something that's not as easy to welcome technology into as it might be into things like telecommunications. And we have the other piece that's really critical here, and I think that's where I want to touch on in terms of the program, the initiative, the partnership that I want to talk about in the next few slides, and that is about society and customers. And in addition to the technology pushing, customers are pulling it. So customers are wanting more technology in general. And I think COVID is a really great example of how, despite the fact that even in Atlantic Canada, and I know APEC has a report that Tech Impact had done, I think, a partnership or commission report around embracing of technology and acceptance of technology in Atlantic Canada. And we do tend to be technology laggards, but it will be interesting to see as we get through COVID and we're doing things like we are today. We're on webinars. We're advancing our technology comfort. How is this going to impact energy? Because really, this new energy system is about customers, and the decentralization and local energy can't happen without customers as partners in the grid. You can go ahead, please, Erica. So this slide kind of sums it up, I think. Some things that Greg was talking about, and as well what Brett was talking about with SMRs. But grid edge is a term that is used in the industry. It's not really a complicated term at all. It's the interface between the power grid and customers, as I talked about, and the technologies, and even more than technologies. It's new approaches and new processes that are going to connect customers to the power grid, to be partners in the grid. And these innovations, like I mentioned, are really helping to drive this transition. And I do always talk about it as a push-pull, because that's what it's going to continue to be. There's going to be things that we don't even know about yet that are going to be part of our electricity system and our asset mix that will lead us forth into decarbonizing this massive system, because we are moving away from predominantly large central electricity generation to a more local and distributed system. And all that means is that energy resources can be spread out with customers in homes, in businesses. They can be in universities with a microgrid. They can be in neighborhoods. And it really is an efficient form of generation, in that with a centralized system, we're sending power long distances over high voltage lines. And so there's some inefficiencies there. There's still a necessity there from traditional generation, but there's another piece to this, I think, that that we have to continue to look at, which is that the participation ability for customers and society in this new power system that's more decentralized is really key here. So customers essentially become partners in the grid. So the grid, for the last 100 years has been really a push. We push electrons out, customers receive them, they use them. We don't get them to think a lot about how they're using them, and that's been part of our challenge in the electricity industry, is that we're grappling with things like peak power and how we generate peak power on cold mornings, and in the US, of course, for air conditioning load. And this is where our story keeps weaving together with climate change and carbon reduction, is we need to reduce that peak power. We need to, often that peak power is met by fossil fuel generation. And so we have a commitment, we have a requirement to reduce that, no matter what other solutions might be in the grid for decarbonization. But we do have a commitment to bring that power peak down, and some opportunities exist, certainly in terms of conservation, efficiency, and the energy pyramid, which moves right up into renewables. So in this future, if customers are partners in the grid, they aren't just consuming electricity anymore. They'll produce it. You know, we talked about solar panels, Greg mentioned, and as well, we have, you know, wind farms, and we have solar farms, and we have, you know, other technologies like smart thermostats, like energy storage, like electric vehicles, where really this grid edge is where it's at in terms of decentralizing and local power and having customers become partners. We even extend ourselves into trading it with neighbors, selling it back to the grid. And they essentially customers become prosumers. So they're not only consuming electricity, they're producing it as well. You can advance, please, Erica. So what I want to talk for a few minutes about is really, I guess, why I'm here in terms of the project that Siemens is working on with Nova Scotia Power and MB Power and our federal funding partners. And it's a $90 million research, development, demonstration, and deployment, all of those things. It's an initiative that is really focusing on the seamless integration of all of these energy resources that we've been talking about, and really the control of them, and the partnership with them, with customers on the power grid. And that's where new customer programs come in. So many programs to customers aren't accessible or possible unless there's a technology at the grid edge to connect them. And as I mentioned, a lot of those technologies include things like smart home devices, EV charging, solar and energy storage, and those are all things that are in homes and businesses. They're in communities, microgrids, and I talked about neighborhood home-to-home energy trading, which is something that seems like a far-off concept, but in fact, some of these concepts are being explored in other parts of North America with some great success around customer engagement. And the piece for Siemens that's really interesting here, and Siemens works with utilities all over the world, on solutions to integrate renewables and to integrate distributed energy resources that we're talking about, both distributed storage, distributed generation, and some of these other loads that are really controllable loads. And that's when we bring in things like smart thermostats and water heater devices. And Siemens is working on, in this project, something called the Energy System Platform, which is really to leverage all of these energy technologies for customer and utility benefit, and that's always a shared benefit that we need to keep at top of mind, is what's the shared benefit of these energy resources that are now going to live and breathe out on the grid, and we may not own them. You can advance the slide. This is a quick overview of how Smart Grid Atlantic is structured. It's really through Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, and it's in some communities, but it's also distributed through Nova Scotia in terms of customer and business-based installations. You can see on the right-hand side as well a lot of the things that I mentioned. Hadn't mentioned yet building automation systems. That's part of it as well, and it's all underpinned by this energy system platform. Microgrids are part of this as well, and you can also see in the text box that part of the energy system platform, a component of that is the microgrid control platform. So that's creating these, again, back at some of our core, tenets of providing stable electricity, resiliency, reliability, and microgrid is an opportunity to explore some of these things. You can advance. So really getting to the core of the Smart Grid Atlantic objectives, and I think I've tried to do a mashup of the objectives of all the partners, and we have industry involved, we have utilities involved, we have our federal funding partners, and obviously economic and social benefits are a big driver here, reducing carbon emissions, and certainly for the utilities and Siemens as well, the penetration and flexibility of renewables is key here. So how can we maximize this and still maintain a stable system, resilient, reliable, all those kind of things I spoke about. And then the bottom point I'll just dial in on, and I think this is really the key part of Smart Grid Atlantic in terms of looking at the shared benefits with electricity customers and the opportunity to really be out there and exploring with people that are participating in this research, and they want to be part of this. And we have to keep that top of mind because they want to be part of this, and we want to research and test and figure out how all of these distributed energy resources, how they behave out there, how they behave in people's homes, how customers are using them, how they're changing their habits, how we're able to incent them to change their habits and use the technology. So it gives us a very rich opportunity to determine how how the power system can benefit and leverage these resources out there as part of our kind of mix of low carbon solutions in the future. Final slide, please. So I think really that's the big story here for everyone. And I know, Colleen, you want to get to some questions. I want to give you time to do that. So we've talked about a lot of low carbon opportunities. And I think that I'm hoping everyone gets a sense of how these all work together and how whatever the future holds, and we don't know all of it, we don't know all of the assets that are going to be out in the system. There's some that haven't revealed themselves to us yet. There's a ton of research happening, as you know, in this field. But no matter what that is, we need the grid intelligence. There's going to be thousands and millions of data points with new energy resources, and we need this grid intelligence so operators can manage them to ensure all the components of the power system that we trust. And really, that's smart grid. That's smart grid. So I hope that you got a flavor for that through that short presentation. Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. I got some tremendous takeaways from that, and I hope all the other participants did as well. One thing, of course, is the time that all this takes. I know that the Smart Grid Initiative is going on for over a decade, and then you look at some of these other things that are just at the forefront: hydrogen development, SMR, and the fact that it's a very long pipeline from concept and research and commercialization to actually getting it all integrated. So thank you so much, all of you. I'm going to ask a couple quick questions just to follow up on some of these ideas that were brought forward. Derek, I'll start with you on the hydrogen front. So you mentioned that New Brunswick and Nova Scotia may be very well positioned to look at implementing hydrogen because of the plastic pipes and the infrastructure and the network that we have developed here. But I'm sure there's challenges as well. So maybe you can outline some of those.
Sure. I think the reality is we're facing several challenges, and I encourage people who are watching the panel today to start thinking about how we can all work together to overcome them. So one is this lack of knowledge and understanding about hydrogen by the public, by government, and even by stakeholders within the energy industry. So a lot of us are just now starting to think about hydrogen and the role that it might play. Secondly, we don't have the infrastructure that we need to produce low carbon hydrogen at the kind of scale required to make it competitive with other forms of renewable energy. We're going to need public investment to develop hydrogen in the Maritimes and to do it at lower cost. I mean, we've seen how public investment has supported the growth of renewable electricity and electrification, and we need similar kinds of investments now for hydrogen. And from a regulatory standpoint, the whole regulatory framework and policies must be created not just to support hydrogen development, but also to support the energy system transformation that we'll need to get to net zero here in the Maritimes. And just finally, I'd say we need more collaboration. Our energy policies are provincial and focus on specific fuel types like electricity, natural gas, or petroleum products. And we need to be looking at the energy system in a completely new and regionally coordinated way, and not in sort of provincial, utility, or individual end-use silos.
And Brett, I'm going to switch over to you. You had some great comments about the all of the above approach, and it all has to work together. We have to have renewables, we have to have nuclear. There's digitization involved. There's also all of the system integration that that Greg has talked about, and Sonya as well. And SMR in your comments seem to have this pretty flexible approach itself, where it can be used for storage, for making hydrogen, for peaking, as well as base load. Maybe you can give us a few more comments just on the opportunity for SMR here in New Brunswick.
I think the opportunity, as we said, is twofold. One is to meet net zero. And again, it's a combination of all the above. It's the orchestration that Sonya was talking about. It all has to come together, and it needs to work together. But the new nuclear is very flexible. It's not like the old nuclear thermal base load units that are typically online 100% power 100% of the time. So these new nuclear small modular reactors are very conducive to this energy future. And it also takes care of a lot of the concerns that the public has. The other aspect is we want to make sure if we're going to invest in technology that it has longevity. It's going to help us meet our goals by 2050, but there's not going to be a new version or computer that's coming along every 2 years or 3 years, and you never really catch up to the technology. You develop it, it's going to take a time to develop it, but once you develop it, it has some sticking power, or it's going to be around for another 30 years, maybe until fusion comes along. So the other aspect of that opportunity is everybody's waking up. Everybody's realizing you need nuclear as a piece of the pie. So when you look south of the border in the United States, people have been sitting on the fence. The government has been investing in SMRs. Most of the utilities are on the fence looking at SMRs, but there's no carbon tax down there. There's plenty of natural gas. So they're kind of sitting in the shadow, just waiting. We are in the lead right now in North America on SMRs and advanced small modular reactors. We want to take advantage of that. So we have a very narrow window of opportunity. Back to you, Colleen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Greg, I noticed in your presentation a lot of partnership going on, a lot of reaching out and collaborating, and I'm sure that that's a big part of the success for Summerside, and a very receptive community as well with these activities. So what's next steps for Summerside? Are you going to start pausing, or is there more on the pipeline that they're going to be looking at?
No, we've actually created a roadmap for our community trying to get to the next step. So the next step is using the investments we already have in our integrations and start investing in integrating more and going down even to the micro level to the customers and consumer levels for devices. We want to truly create a smart grid that one thing that's driving it for us is we're an island, and all our I'll say, to keep a stable grid, you need to have variability control. And one of the easier ways to do that is create relationships with customers and businesses to allow the utility to control their loads, to help with the variability of renewables so they can all be integrated better and not rely so much on the conventional ways of integrating that variability into electric grids. We're not sure if it's all possible yet, but we're definitely open to try innovative ideas. And we do try to incorporate partnerships. And we do openly share all our data information. We're not ones to keep any intellectual property. We like to share with the world and business partners and actually help them succeed. And that's really our mantra in Summerside. And we try to open up all our doors to anybody that's interested in trying different things. Now, for us, there's 4 key stakeholders in any business opportunity. One is the environment. The second one is the utility needs to sustain it. The third, the customer needs to benefit. And the fourth one is the community itself. We try to be very innovative in keeping energy dollars in our community if we can. So that's a huge exporting opportunity to keep those dollars stirring in the local economy.
Yeah, and I think that's one of Brett's key points as well, developing a local supplier network in this region. And so very good point. Thanks very much, Greg. And Sonya, there's a lot of barriers still to go forward with this full system integration. So what are some of the things that you're looking at that are going to get us to the next step, so that the actual consumers will start, and ratepayers and users of electricity will start seeing some of this come to life?
Yeah, I think, there are barriers for sure. And we do know in this, much more participatory, decentralized future, we have to have it, excellent alignment. And we're seeing this all across the globe, in fact, with the alignment of policymakers and regulatory bodies. And at times, those entities can lag in terms of setting the scene or creating the environment, so some of these technologies can proliferate and utilities can take advantage of them and customers can take advantage of them. So it's a real shared story, but I believe more than ever before, the energy stakeholders, we really need to be pulling in the same direction, right, for benefit of carbon reduction, costs for utilities, costs for consumers, and what are the opportunities, to get over some of these humps for adoption and for programs that support customers to feel that there's a motivation for them to get involved in some of these, new energy programs and take advantage of technologies that will, provide them benefit, comfort, satisfaction, all those kinds of things. So I think it's the alignment of those parties, those partners.
Thanks very much for all of you. We're getting really close to our time here. We started a few minutes late, and so we're going to run out of time. But thanks very much to all the panelists. Thanks to everyone for attending today. I'm going to pass it over to David, but I'm going to make just one last comment, is that there will be a synopsis of the first seminar and this one and the next one that we will be sending out to people that have registered. That will be developed by the Atlantic Centre for Energy. And that for the chat questions that came up, we will be capturing those and forwarding them on and getting responses back to those that we can. So if your question was not answered, not to worry. This is just the beginning of the discussion. So David, over to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Colleen, for hosting and moderating the panel today. Thank you again for all four presenters, very informative and insightful presentations. Again, I just encourage you to complete the evaluation form we'll be sending out online. It only takes about 30 seconds to complete. I just encourage you to respond to that email when you receive it. And if you've not already done so, to sign up for the final session in this series, which is on October the 15th, I'd encourage you to do that. And again, I think one of the things that come out, there's a lot more work to do on the energy file. There's a lot more research and thinking about these questions. So this is certainly a topic that we plan to continue to do more research as we move forward. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you found this very helpful. And again, thank you for Colleen and Atlantic Centre for partnering with us.